city at night had always been my canvas. The gleaming lights, the towering buildings, and the endless sky created a backdrop that was both beautiful and haunting. My name is Clara, and I am a photographer. Capturing the soul of the city through my lens is my passion. Little did I know that this passion would lead me to a series of events that would change my life forever. It was a chilly autumn night when it all began. I had been out since dusk, seeking the perfect shot of the cityscape from the rooftop of an abandoned building. The building had been a bustling hotel in the 1920s, but now it stood as a silent sentinel, watching over the ever-changing city. I climbed the rickety fire escape ladder, my camera slung over my shoulder, and reached the roof just as the last light of day faded into the darkness. As I set up my tripod and framed my shot, I felt an eerie sensation, as if someone were watching me. I shrugged it off, attributing it to the cold wind that seemed to whisper through the cracks in the rooftop. The city looked stunning through my lens, a glittering mosaic of lights and shadows. I clicked the shutter, capturing the beauty of the night. That's when I heard it. A faint whisper, almost inaudible, carried by the wind. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around, but there was no one else on the roof. I listened intently, straining to catch any sound, but the whisper had ceased. Shaking off the unease, I continued to take photos. As the night wore on, the whispers returned, more distinct this time. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, murmuring words I couldn't quite understand. I felt a chill run down my spine and decided to pack up and leave. As I gathered my equipment, I noticed something peculiar through my lens. A figure, standing on the rooftop of the building across the street. I focused my camera and zoomed in, but the figure was gone. Confused, I scanned the rooftop with my eyes, but it was empty. A sense of dread settled over me as I descended the fire escape and made my way home. The next day, I developed the photos I had taken. As I examined them, my blood ran cold. In several shots, there were faint, ghostly figures on the rooftops, figures that I hadn't seen with my naked eye. They appeared to be in distress, their faces twisted in anguish. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Was it a trick of the light, a camera malfunction, or something more sinister? Determined to find out, I returned to the abandoned hotel the following night. This time, I brought a voice recorder, hoping to capture the whispers. As I reached the rooftop, the city seemed unusually quiet, as if holding its breath. I set up my equipment and waited. Hours passed, and just as I was about to give up, the whispers began again. I turned on the recorder and listened. The voices were clearer now, speaking in hushed tones. It sounded like a conversation between two people, but I couldn't make out the words. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and a thick fog enveloped the rooftop. Out of the mist, I saw them spectral figures reenacting scenes of past tragedies. A woman in a tattered dress, sobbing uncontrollably. A man clutching his chest and collapsing, and a child reaching out, her face a mask of terror. The scenes played out before me like a macabre theater. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to tear my eyes away. Then, one of the figures, a man with hollow eyes, turned and looked directly at me. "Help us," he whispered, his voice echoing in my mind. "Release us from this torment." Terrified, I backed away, nearly tripping over my equipment. The fog thickened, and the whispers grew louder, more desperate. "How?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking. "Find the truth," the man replied. "Uncover the past. Only then can we be free. With that, the fog lifted, and the figures vanished. I stood there, trembling, trying to comprehend what I had just witnessed. The whispers had stopped, but their message was clear. I had to uncover the history of this building and the tragedies that had occurred here. The next day, I delved into the archives at the local library, searching for any information about the abandoned hotel. I discovered that it had been the site of numerous mysterious deaths and suicides over the years. People had reported hearing whispers and seeing ghostly apparitions on the rooftops, but no one had ever been able to explain the phenomena. One name kept appearing in the records: Henry Whitaker, the hotel's original owner. He had been a wealthy and influential man, but his life ended in scandal and tragedy. Rumor had it that he had been involved in dark, occult practices, trying to achieve immortality. His untimely death was shrouded in mystery, and many believed that his restless spirit still haunted the building. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I visited Henry Whitaker's grave. As I stood there, a sense of unease washed over me. I felt a presence, as if someone was watching me. The whispers began again, urging me to dig deeper, to find the truth. I followed the trail of clues, uncovering old letters, diaries, and newspaper articles. Piece by piece, I began to understand the horrifying truth. Henry Whitaker had indeed been involved in dark rituals, and in his quest for immortality, he had made a pact with malevolent spirits. When the ritual went wrong, it unleashed a curse upon the hotel, trapping the souls of those who died there. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the rooftop one last time. I brought with me the letters and artifacts I had found, hoping to use them to break the curse. As I laid them out on the rooftop, the fog returned, and the spectral figures reappeared. This time, they seemed more solid, more real. "I know the truth," I said, my voice steady despite the fear gripping my heart. "I know what happened here." The man with hollow eyes stepped forward. "Then you must perform the ritual," he said. "You must undo what has been done." Following his instructions, I arranged the artifacts in a specific pattern and recited the incantation from one of Henry Whitaker's letters. The air grew heavy, and the whispers reached a deafening crescendo. I felt a surge of energy, and the ground beneath me seemed to tremble. Suddenly, there was a blinding flash of light, and the whispers stopped. The fog dissipated, and the spectral figures faded away, their expressions now peaceful. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, knowing that I had freed them from their torment. Exhausted, I gathered my equipment and left the rooftop for the last time. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. The city had revealed its dark secrets to me, and I had helped to put the restless spirits to rest. The whispers never returned, but I continued to capture the beauty of the city through my lens. Every time I looked at the skyline, I was reminded of the night I had faced my fears and uncovered the haunting truth. The rooftops held their secrets, but now they were at peace, and so was I. I've never been much of a sleeper. Since childhood, I've struggled with insomnia, often lying awake for hours, listening to the hum of the city beyond my window. The insomnia worsened after I moved into the old townhouse on Willow Street. Something about that place kept me awake, as if the house itself whispered secrets too dark for daylight. One particularly restless night around midnight, I decided to take a walk. I figured the cool air might help me unwind, and the deserted streets would offer a rare, tranquil reprieve from the bustling chaos of the city. I threw on my coat and stepped outside, feeling the crisp night air nip at my skin. Willow Street was eerily silent, the usual sounds of distant traffic and sirens muted. The streetlights cast long shadows, their pale light barely piercing the darkness. I walked aimlessly, my mind wandering, until I found myself standing at the curb, staring across the street. Something about the other side called to me, an inexplicable pull that I couldn't resist. I glanced at my watch. 12:13 a.m. A strange time to be out, I thought, but curiosity got the better of me. With hesitant steps, I crossed the street. The moment my foot touched the opposite curb, a chill ran down my spine. The air felt different, thicker somehow, and a fog began to roll in, swallowing the street in a dense, suffocating mist. As I moved forward, the fog parted just enough for me to see. The city looked the same, yet something was unmistakably off. The buildings, though familiar, seemed aged, their facades crumbling and covered in vines. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting ghostly glows on the deserted sidewalks. Then I saw them. People, ghostly figures, moving through the fog. They drifted aimlessly, their faces twisted in expressions of pain and sorrow. My heart pounded as I watched them, realizing these weren't just ordinary people. They were reliving their final moments over and over again. One figure caught my eye. A woman, her face gaunt and eyes hollow, walked in a loop, clutching a tattered photograph. She muttered under her breath, words I couldn't quite make out. I felt an overwhelming urge to help her, to understand her suffering. As I approached, she suddenly turned to me, her eyes locking onto mine. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I don't know," I stammered. "I couldn't sleep, I just crossed the street." She nodded slowly, as if understanding more than she let on. "This place, it's where we end up, those who can't move on. We're trapped, forced to relive our last moments." "Is there a way out?" I asked, my voice shaking. She looked past me, her expression vacant. "For some, maybe. For others, this is all that remains." A shiver ran through me as I realized the weight of her words. I didn't want to end up like them, stuck in a perpetual nightmare. I needed to leave, to get back to my side of the street. But as I turned to go, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun around to see a man, his eyes wide with terror. "You can't leave now. You've crossed over. They'll come for you." "Who?" I demanded, panic rising in my chest. He didn't answer, just pointed down the street. In the distance, shadows moved, dark figures gliding toward us. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. The shadows grew closer, their shapes becoming more defined. Men and women with hollow eyes and gaping mouths, their bodies twisted and broken. "Run!" the man shouted, shoving me forward. I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted down the street, the fog swirling around me, making it difficult to see. I could hear them behind me, the ghostly citizens of this alternate city, their moans echoing in the night. My heart pounded in my ears as I searched desperately for a way back, a way to escape this nightmare. I spotted a familiar landmark, an old, decrepit church that stood at the corner of Willow and Main. If I could make it there, maybe I could find shelter, a place to hide. I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning with effort. The church loomed closer, its doors slightly ajar, as if beckoning me inside. I burst through the doors, slamming them shut behind me. The interior was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of decay. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. The silence inside was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. "Welcome," a voice said, making me jump. I turned to see an old man sitting in one of the pews, his eyes fixed on me. He looked out of place, too real for this ghostly realm. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Just a caretaker," he replied. "This place, it's a refuge for those like you." "Like me?" I echoed. He nodded. "Those who wander into the other side. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. But there is a way out." "How?" I asked eagerly. "The church stands at the border between worlds. If you can face your fears, confront the darkness within, you can return." I swallowed hard, fear clawing at my insides. "And if I can't, then you become one of them," he said simply. "A ghost, forever trapped." I looked around the church, noticing the shadows that lingered just out of sight. My heart raced as I realized I didn't have much time. The figures outside would soon find me, and I needed to act fast. The old man gestured to the altar. "Kneel and face your fears. Only then will you find the strength to leave." With a deep breath, I walked to the altar and knelt, closing my eyes. My mind filled with images of my darkest fears: failure, loss, loneliness. They swirled around me, taunting and jeering. I felt their weight pressing down, threatening to crush me. But then I remembered the woman with the photograph, the man who had helped me. They were trapped, but I still had a chance. I couldn't give up, couldn't let the darkness win. "I am not afraid," I whispered, the words gaining strength as I spoke them. "I will not be trapped here." The darkness recoiled, the images fading. I felt a warmth spreading through me, a light cutting through the gloom. I opened my eyes to find the church bathed in a golden glow, the figures outside disappearing into the mist. The old man smiled, a look of approval in his eyes. "You've done it. You're free to go." I stood, feeling a sense of relief and triumph. "Thank you," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. He nodded, his form beginning to fade. "Remember, not everyone is so lucky. Cherish your second chance." I walked to the door, pausing to take one last look at the church. Then I stepped outside, the fog lifting as I crossed back to the other side of the street. The city was as I remembered, the buildings intact, the streetlights steady. I glanced at my watch. 12:45 a.m. It felt like hours had passed, but barely any time had elapsed. I took a deep breath, the cool air filling my lungs, and started walking home. From that night on, I never crossed the street after midnight again. The memory of that alternate city, with its ghostly citizens and relentless darkness, stayed with me. And whenever I felt the pull of insomnia, I reminded myself of the caretaker's words. Some fears are best faced head-on, but some streets are better left uncrossed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I pulled my rig off to the shoulder of the old interstate. Dust swirled around the tires as I came to a stop. Inside the trailer, a myriad of items clinked and clattered. Old belongings I'd agreed to haul to a little-known auction house in Nevada. It was a job like any other, or so I thought. The day had been long, and the road had been unforgiving. I decided to review the manifest one last time, ensuring everything matched up before hitting the road again in the morning. I flicked on the overhead light in the cab, the yellow glow casting long shadows. The manifest was an old yellowed paper, brittle at the edges. I unfolded it carefully, eyes scanning the list of items. A child's rocking horse, a faded wedding dress, an assortment of rusted tools, an old typewriter, a stack of dusty books, and other knickknacks. But as I perused the list, a small addendum at the bottom caught my attention. A note scrawled in a hurried, almost panicked script. Special handling required for items in the last crate. Personal effects of individuals with notorious pasts. Curiosity prickled at my skin. Notorious pasts. I retrieved my flashlight, the beam piercing through the darkness of the trailer as I made my way to the last crate. It was a large old wooden box, nailed shut. Pulling a crowbar from my toolkit, I pried open the crate with a creak that echoed through the silent night. Inside, the flashlight revealed a collection of objects that made my skin crawl. A tarnished silver locket, a collection of small, sharp knives, each with a different handle, a thick, leather-bound diary, and a cracked porcelain doll with one eye missing. I should have nailed the crate shut then and there, put it out of my mind until delivery. But curiosity, fear's reckless companion, urged me to examine each item. The diary belonged to a woman known for poisoning her lovers. The locket was last owned by a man who whispered into the ears of the sleeping before he took their lives. The knives were used in rituals that promised eternal life, but delivered untold suffering. The porcelain doll, according to the scribbled note tucked beside it, was found in the arms of a child who had vanished for weeks and returned without a single memory of where she had been. I replaced the items, a sense of unease settling deep in my bones, but the damage was done. Back in my cab, the air grew colder, the shadows deeper. I started the engine. The familiar hum of the diesel beneath me, usually a comfort, but now it sounded like a growl. As I drove, the items began their torment. The radio switched on, static filling the cab before whispering voices broke through, speaking in tongues I couldn't understand but felt deep in my marrow. The locket appeared on my passenger seat, suddenly, its clasp opening and closing like a tiny, hungry mouth. Each mile grew heavier, the night darker, and the road lonelier. I saw figures in the mirror, shadows flitting in the edges of my vision, figures that ducked when I tried to look directly at them. The laughter of a woman, the crying of a child, it filled the cab, bouncing off the metal and glass until I thought I'd go mad. I pulled over, thinking to rid myself of the crate, but found myself unable to open the trailer door, the handles cold as ice, refusing to budge. As I struggled, the whispers grew into screams, the pasts of the items clawing their way into my present, demanding to be heard, to be felt. Realizing I couldn't run from what I'd unleashed, I did the only thing I could think of. I drove straight to my destination, never stopping, never looking back, the cries and whispers my constant companions. When I arrived, the sun was just peeking over the horizon, the first light of dawn a balm to my frayed nerves. I handed over the manifest and the keys to the auction house owner, a look of concern crossing his face as he glanced from the paper to my haggard appearance. "You should have left them be," he said simply, a statement, not a question. I nodded, too tired to explain, too scared to relive the night. I didn't stop to see if the items were unloaded, didn't wait to sign off. I just got back into my cab, the silence a strange companion after a night filled with the echoes of the past. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty, the dawn light pure and clear. But something told me that the shadows of those items, the weight of their pasts, would linger in my cab and in my dreams for many miles yet.